The Familiar Weight, a dark and stormy story. It was a dark and stormy night. The kind of night you read about in the stories, the ones where malice lingers in the silence between the roar of thunder. That silence was gone for Gregory now, engulfed and destroyed by the crashing rain and the churning waves, the barking call of the shipmates and the clacking of his shivering teeth. It was still there, though, broken but waiting, lingering to invade Gregory's mind when it got the chance. He had felt it before, in the pub where he had waited, alone but for his beer, as he reread the message before him. I found them. Out on the water, Arishead Bay, the island of Cronvalach. Their house sits by a rock that looks like a dead giant's head. Enclosed is what you asked for. Careful. These things are heavy. That last line had not made much sense to him. The iron was weighty indeed, but not more than he could carry. It felt firm in his hand and comforting inside his pocket. A human-made creation, the one that he must admit was a credit to their race. Simplistic, cold, and effortlessly deadly. It seemed to resonate with the silence in the bar. Feel out the malice that was there and summon it from the dark corners. Pull it out and stuff it all into Gregory's heart for safekeeping. Had it been a night like this when they had killed him? All he remembered was the burning wreck of the iron carriage, running out and seeing it with Mother. His tiny hand lost in hers as he stared out at the wreckage, the dark magics twisting it to an unnatural purpose. To melt metal and flesh and bone and everything else that had once been Gregory's father. When he thought back to it now, he always pictured it as a night like this. Was that fitting? He didn't give a shit. He had downed his drink then and left the pub, feeling more ready and less certain than he ever had in his whole life. It had not been hard to find a captain willing to brave the storm, but Gregory couldn't wait, and his long years as a bank manager had given him plenty of coin to waste. What else was he going to spend it on? The captain had been a human, and a grumpy one at that. He had taken in Gregory's small stature, reddish skin, and round glasses, and scoffed at first. Then the gold had come out, and his demeanor had shifted somewhat. Though, it must be said, the resentment still lingered, squirming beneath the surface. His kind were always resentful when taking orders from the small folk. They figured they were owed some respect for the years of blood. Figures. The captain had muttered some insult under his breath about botkins and money-hoarding land dwellers. Gregory had ignored it. He hadn't cared if the man was a racist or not, just as long as he got him where he needed to go. He supposed he felt a twinge of regret now, as the boat shook violently and a crashing wave collapsed over his shoulders, soaking him to the skin. Damned other races and their desire to seek the sea. There's no place for a God-fearing creature. Gregory held on to a slither of hope. This would be his first and last time at sea. At that moment, the captain made his way over to him, barely stumbling though the boat was rocking with the high waves. Gregory dare not walk across the deck like that. He clung to the metal railing for all he was worth, his dark hair plastered to his red scalp, looking awful lot like a drowned mole. "Aren't far off now," the captain roared over the rain, and Gregory nodded to him, scared to speak unless it came out garbled. The captain didn't leave after that, though. He lingered for a moment, his dark eyes watching Gregory. Finally, he grunted and said, "You sure about this? I can still turn us round, no bother." Gregory glared at him coldly. How dare he? Just like humans to shove their long noses into other folks' business. They had been quick to offer their help when the Kinmar had been killing off the botkins in thousands. The red folk standing little chance against the heretical sea flame magic of the Kinmar. The humans had helped end that conflict, bringing their twisted machines and roaring irons. For a price, of course. They had taken great compensation from the botkins, and then they had never left. They just stayed here and shoved their long, pointy noses into whatever matter popped up next, slinking and skiving and grubbing, always eager, ever eager for more botkin coin. Did they have no shame? The murderous, thieving... The captain nodded slowly, and Gregory realized that he had not replied. The captain had taken that for an affirmation, and said instead, "Right then, Luca will take you in on the rowboat." We aren't gonna wait round for you long, though, so whatever business you have on that island, you best get it done quick." Then he lumbered off, barely swaying as the boat pitched and tossed, its grinding engines protesting against this unjust treatment. Screw him, Gregory thought to himself as he clutched the railing tighter. Humans were good for nothing anyway. Well, almost nothing. Gregory fingered the iron in his jacket. It was cold. It was weighty. No, that's not right. It was waiting. Then he heard it, clear as birdsong on a clear day. The silence between the thunder. It was still there, beneath the rain and the waves. Patient, hungry, building tension for the final crescendo. The rowboat journey was less enjoyable than he could have imagined, and Gregory was thankful when the hull of the boat slid into the soft sand. The young rower looked exhausted. For a moment, Gregory was scared that he would not have the strength to row them back. He tossed away that thought. It wasn't worth considering right now. He needed to focus on the act that was to come. He slid his hand into his coat again as he struggled up the beach. His numb fingers closed around the iron that was kept there. He was unable to let it go now. It comforted him too much. It took him a long time to find the house, and he often felt his worry grow, wondering if he had come to the right place or if this had been some trick. Perhaps the information he had been given was wrong. Perhaps the captain had left him here on purpose, simply to spite him and make off with his coin. That would be a very human thing to do. You could almost see his pudgy pink face roaring with laughter. He was just wiping the rain off his glasses for the 100th time when he saw it. The unmistakable shape of a dark, round rock, roughly the size and shape of a giant's head. And beside it, a small white cottage. It had fishing nets drawn up outside it, and a small wooden boat was tossing away on the tiny pier. Gregory sneered when he saw this. "Salt flesh eaters, bottom scroungers," he hissed under his breath. Yes, this was a Kinmar house, and no doubt. There was a simple garden and a dark wooden shed where a figure lingered, head down from the rain as he worked on something. Gathering logs, perhaps. There was something familiar about the way he moved, though Gregory knew he had never met this man. His heart began to beat faster. This was it. He clutched the iron as he called out, but his voice was swallowed by the wind. He called again, louder this time, and felt a thrill of delight as the figure in the shed turned. It rose and turned slowly, almost teasingly. Gregory saw a red-skinned face looking back at him, grey hair and grey beard, framed cautious eyes. What was he thinking now, he thought? Who is this stranger on my isle, and how did he get here? Is this the day I pave my sins? Or maybe he was just wondering if he should offer Gregory some tea. "Hello there," the man called, and Gregory felt himself stiffen. It was like his whole body had been drawn tight on a string. He could see the disgusting salt-eater before him. His kind had pulled old things from the water and used them to burn the land, to burn Gregory's own father. He had no forgiveness for them, especially not for this one, the one who had lit the flame that burned and killed, the one that he had loved so dear. Gregory stared down at the man and felt nothing but hatred for him, for the years that his kind had eradicated his own with fire and lightning, unholy abominations that feasted on the fruits of the depths. "Are you Killian Val Arten?" Gregory asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm sorry," said the man, dropping the wood from his arms and craning his ear towards Gregory. Gregory asked again, this time enunciating each word. "Are you Killian Val Arten?" Realization seemed to dawn on the fish-eater's face, and his eyes darted to the house. There was a staff resting against the door frame there, his driftwood staff, the cursed gift of the black depths that called forth unquenchable flame. "Don't do it," Gregory said, his words firm and empty. The man didn't listen and made a move for the staff. Gregory pulled the iron from his jacket and pointed at Killian. He stopped at once, his eyes going wide with fear. "You killed my father," Gregory said, and was surprised to find that his voice was remaining steady. This all felt so right, so perfectly in tune. It was like he was an actor on a stage. All the lines were already learnt. A script had been written. The show had to happen. This had to happen. He was just a player on the stage, being drawn inexorably towards his inevitable conclusion. "Please," said Killian, just like Gregory knew he would. I have a daughter." Gregory's finger tightened on the iron, and it kicked in his hand. Once, twice, thrice. Then his father's killer was falling, pitching forwards into the earth without a sound, without even a grunt. His face hit the mud, and Gregory was already walking. He didn't need to look, didn't need to see. The purity of it all was condensed into the thud of his collapse, a sound he may have imagined beneath the storm, but it didn't matter. It was his forever. He tossed the iron over the cliff into the sea, still unable to feel a thing, still feeling like he was acting on the lines that he had been given. It was heavy. It sunk like a stone. Even after it was gone, though, he felt the weight of it in his pocket, felt the kick of it in his hand, like an endless vibration or spasm, repeating the motion over and over. Bang, 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 thud. And repeat, and repeat, and repeat, until those are the only sounds. Let all sounds be reduced to bang, 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 and thud. What a symphony. The rowboat was there when he returned, and they pushed back into the water, returning to the boat, though the trip was a rough one. The captain didn't say a word the whole trip back, but Gregory didn't care. It was done now. It was all over. The thing was finished, and it would never again rear its ugly head. The weight of it was gone from his shoulders. He could finally rest. But the weight was not gone, nor did it ever leave. Not after Gregory got his family to move from the city. At that point, the bang, bang, bang thud had ceased to be beautiful and now echoed in his head like a terrible drum. He had hoped the quiet of the country would cut it out. He had hoped the changing of his name would make it fade. He believed that it would have been buried when he bought the house on the hill where he could see someone coming from far off. He had faith that it would die when he took up work in the church and spent hour after hour in that sacred place, that place of forgiveness. But it did not fade, and the noise and the weight were always there. 3 sons came and went, a wife was lost and another married, but still he heard it. One night as he lay in bed, rain and thunder roaring outside his window, he suddenly let out a laugh. "Careful, these things are heavy," he said, and smiled. Then he said it again, and again. Without knowing why, he stood and went to the window, looking out down the hill, an actor drawn from the background to face the light. There was a figure approaching in the dark, striding up the hill, full of purpose. It was a cold and stormy night, and Kilia Val Artin clutched her father's staff as she climbed the great embankment to the house that she had heard about, the one where her father's killer lived. There was a silence in her heart, the silence that stretched between the roar of thunder. It was the silence after 3 shots of an iron and the thud of someone falling. The silence of a bloody body in the mud and rain, face down and eyes wide, never to smile again. It was the building, patient tension of a spark that was just waiting to become an inferno. There was a man at the window looking down at her. Their eyes met, and she felt then the undeniable pull of certainty, like she was following a set of footprints in the sand. She was just a child in the arms of destiny, a sailor caught in the waves, tossed and turned by things outside her control, and drawn inexorably towards its inevitable conclusion. Kilia clutched her father's staff as it hissed into life, just the way her father had taught her to, long ago, his worn hands pressing it into her small ones as they practiced. "Careful," he had said, "these things are heavy."